Since President Donald Trump announced his decision to unilaterally withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, there has been a monumental amount of political fallout since he did that. And there hasn't been backlash just in the US. There's been backlash around the world. People are not happy with his decision. And even though I was initially really discouraged by what he decided to do, I actually do feel a little bit more hopeful now, because him being lambasted sends a huge message to future Republican administrations that if you stifle progress that we make to mitigate climate change, there's going to be hell to pay. We will call you out. We will lambast you. We will rake you over the coals because what you're doing is not in the best interest of the species. Now, seeing that Donald Trump is incapable of speaking about this issue, or really many issues, without putting his foot in his mouth, he decided to send out his stooges to do damage control on his behalf. And since they're trying to defend an untenable position, they also failed at doing so. So first, we have Mike Pence talking about his decision.
For some reason or another, this issue of climate change has emerged as a paramount issue for the left in this country and around the world. And through Kyoto, through President Obama's cap and trade agenda, and then in the last year of his administration, to have America saddled in an international agreement in the Paris Accord, I think put a real burden on our economy and on our people.
It's a paramount issue to the left because it impacts the future of humanity. And the fact that he thinks it's ostensibly an issue that only is important to the left should embarrass him, because that shows that conservatives are not in touch with reality. They're ignoring the overwhelming majority of climate scientists that say global warming is occurring, and yes, it's anthropogenic, it is man-made. So he should be embarrassed by that, but he thinks that it's bolstering his argument. And furthermore, he's not on board with fighting climate change because he's bought off by the oil and gas industry, and not even the aggregate oil and gas industry anymore, because not every single oil and gas company is in favor of us doing nothing about climate change, because, after Kyoto, after the Paris Climate Accord, many of them have already seen climate change legislation as something that's inevitable, and they've taken steps to invest in ways to cut back on their carbon footprint. And Donald Trump hurt the country, he hurt the world, and he hurt humanity by making a decision that is just irrational. So Mike Pence is a buffoon to say something like that, to say that it's only an issue that the left is concerned about. Well, maybe, the right doesn't care about it in the United States, but trust me, in other countries, right-wingers are not as dense as they are here in America. Now, of course, the EPA director, Scott Pruitt, who sued the EPA multiple times, came out to defend Donald Trump.
When NASA says that 95% of the experts in this area around the world believe that the Earth is warming, and you are up there throwing out information that says, well, maybe this is being exaggerated and so forth, and you're talking about climate exaggerators, it just seems to a lot of people around the world that you and the president are just denying the reality. And the reality of the situation is that climate change is happening, and it is a significant threat to the planet.
Let me say this, and I've said it in the confirmation process, and I said it yesterday. And
right, about the Arctic ice and the sea levels.
We have done a tremendous amount as a country to achieve reductions in CO2. And we have done that through technology and innovation. We will continue to do that. We will continue to stay engaged. We are a part, as you know, of the UNFCCC. And that process encourages voices by subnational groups and by countries across the globe. And we are going to stay engaged and try to work through agreements and achieve outcomes that put America's interest first. This is not a message to anyone in the world that America should be apologetic of its CO2 position. We are actually making tremendous advances. We're just not going to agree to frameworks and agreements that put us at an economic disadvantage and hurt citizens across this country. Yes, sir.
Though, that you're putting your head in the sand, though, Mr. Pruitt. They were a little worried that you're putting your head in the sand.
Well, there's no evidence of that. Yes, sir.
There's no evidence he's putting his head in the sand, guys. Next question. I don't even think that these guys listen to the words that come out of their mouth. It's verbal diarrhea. And they take no time at all to actually think about what they're saying, because it's just absurd. So he is, in fact, putting his head in the sand, not just with respect to the issue of climate change and whether or not it's anthropogenic, but he's putting his head in the sand with respect to the economic benefits that the U.S. would gain by being a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord. because there's negative economic ramifications if you pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But what he really meant to say was that it hurts the oil and gas industry economically, his donors specifically. But he can't tell you that because that's an indefensible position, so he decided to just lie and obfuscate the truth, like Scott Pruitt typically does. And during his tenure as the Attorney General for Oklahoma, he has been an enemy of the planet, so you shouldn't expect anything less than lies and obfuscation from Scott Pruitt. But nonetheless, he demonstrated that it's really difficult to defend a position that's just downright indefensible.
Yes or no? Does the president believe that climate change is real and a threat to the United States?
You know what's interesting about all the discussions we had through the last several weeks have been focused on one singular issue. Is Paris good or not for this country? That's the discussions I've had with the president. So that's been my focus. The focus remained on whether Paris put us at a disadvantage, and in fact, it did. It put us at an economic disadvantage. You may not know this, but Paris, it set targets of 26 to 28%. With the entire agenda of the previous administration, we still fell 40% short of those targets. It was a failed deal to begin with, and even if all of the targets were met by all nations across the globe, it only reduced the temperature by less than 2/10 degree. So that is something that the president focused upon with respect to how it impacted us economically and whether there were good environmental objectives that were achieved as a result of Paris. His decision was no, and that was the extent of our discussions. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed. That was a Matrix level dodge right there. He just dodged the question like Neo from the Matrix and made a complete ass of himself. So this is the modern day GOP. They are an enemy to humanity, and it's not just like they are hurting people in America. They're hurting people around the world now by their incompetence and their hatred of humanity. So this party is the party of death and destruction. I know people don't like it when I say that, but tough shit. They push policies that are detrimental to society and humanity and the planet, and that's unforgivable. So Donald Trump can send out as many stooges as he likes to try to defend his stupid decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, but you opened a can of worms, and you can't put the cat back in the bag. You pissed off a lot of people in the U.S. and around the world, so good job. The political fallout will continue, and I'm glad.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.